Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Daily Fantasy Digest podcast, the all-inclusive podcast where we talk all things fantasy to give you an edge over the competition. I'm your host, Joe Bewer, and I have a special guest with me today to talk all things NBA fantasy. From the QuantEdge, I have Stefano Vaccarino. How's it going, Stefano?
Hey Joe, I'm doing well. How you doing?
Not too bad. So just a little backstory for everybody listening. Stefano is the product manager over at the QuantEdge. He's in charge of all the writers, all the articles that go out on the website. I highly recommend that if you're going to listen to this podcast, that you go ahead and check them out. They pride themselves on analytics and data and provide the top tier information that you're going to need to be able to take down one of those big money GPP contests. But for today, I know it's a little bit of a change. We've been talking MLB a lot on this podcast, and I want to go ahead and switch it up a little bit. And since this is the all-inclusive daily fantasy podcast that encompasses all sports, I want to talk some NBA since the playoffs are going on, and I felt like we've been neglecting the NBA a little bit. So I thought I'd bring the expert on that knows all things NBA. So what I kind of want to do here is, before we go into this, I want to just ask Stefano, how did you get involved in daily fantasy in general? Like, what sparked your interest? What brought you up? Anything in regards to that?
Sure. First off, I'm just like a big sports fan, and so around 5 or 6 years ago, I discovered FanDuel, and I started playing it, and it was a lot of fun, and so kept going, and so the way really got into daily fantasy sports was I was kind of working a boring 9 to 5 job, and I was succeeding in NBA, and NBA has always been like my favorite sport and the sport I feel like I understand the most. So I started just kind of tweeting out some, random thoughts every day, like kind of during my lunch break, and I had my real name kind of hidden on Twitter because I didn't want to get caught, at work tweeting. But yeah, I kind of just kept tweeting, and I picked up a little bit of a following, and it kept growing. And this opportunity at the QuantEdge came up, and I applied for it, and I'm able to kind of pursue my passion. So I'm pretty excited about it.
So did you start off as a writer, or did you jump straight to product manager?
I jumped straight to the NBA product manager. I was kind of just tweeting about the NBA for 4 years, and giving out a bunch of free content, and got this job.
That's actually quite exciting to hear, because not a lot of people, a lot of people do start off as writers and kind of work their way up. And I think that's pretty awesome. It kind of shows how knowledgeable you actually are as far as NBA, which is exactly what I want to bring to everybody here. So for me, I play a little bit of NBA DFS. I'm assuming you only play NBA, or do you play MLB, anything else?
So once the NBA season ends, I'll play a little MLB. I mostly play just NFL and NBA though. The NBA season is such a grind, so I kind of like having a little break after
Yeah, I bet.
the NBA season. So MLB is I don't need to jump right into another MLB grind.
Right, right. So as far as the NBA playoffs have gone so far, what have been sort of your biggest takeaway from the first round in regard to a fantasy perspective?
Sure. So it kind of fell into place as expected, where you have your stars seeing higher usage, and the big problem with NBA throughout the regular season is the season's too long, and there are weeks, especially late in the year, where teams are resting players, and that doesn't just mean it's the players playing 0 minutes. That means the players may be playing 26 minutes at 65% effort. Once the playoffs start, you have to identify certain players who are basically the stars of their team, and whether they're coming off the bench like Lou Williams, or they're Joel Embiid. They're going to see higher usage because these are more important minutes. This is the season. So right off the bat, someone like Lou Williams was a guy I targeted and I loved, and he was underpriced. He was priced based off his last 2 weeks of the regular season, and I knew he wasn't going to play 22 to 26 minutes, I should say. He was going to see starters minutes off the bench with elite usage, and that's exactly what happened. So next year, for example, if this is obviously looking way ahead, but it's important to identify, especially the first couple days of the NBA playoffs, those sort of players who are going to see a minutes bump and who are going to see a usage bump.
Right, and I think that's pretty important to kind of look at, especially like let's take a team as in the Philadelphia 76ers. They're pretty balanced as far as talent, so the usage there is pretty heavily spread out. And it's kind of hard to target any specific player other than Joel Embiid. Correct me if I'm wrong there.
Well, yeah, and the problem with Embiid these playoffs, and he's frustrating everyone, is that he's a game time decision every single day, and he's more likely to play than not. But clearly, like his knee is not 100%, and so that's kind of one of the. I mean, he's probably not the greatest example just because of his knee, but
right. But I mean, when you have a team with Embiid, Tobias Harris, Ben Simmons, Jimmy Butler, JJ Redick, I mean, you're kind of torn between which two are going to go off any given night when factoring in for a lineup.
Yep, and for the Sixers specifically, we've seen JJ Redick kind of be an afterthought, and he's been unplayable these playoffs because, like you said, they have so many big names that are just hogging all the usage. That JJ Redick is someone who's seeing less shots, and even if he's efficient, he's just not seeing enough shots, and he doesn't produce in his peripherals enough to justify playing him. Someone who has kind of surprised me in terms of production has been Tobias Harris, and he's taken a step in his rebounding totals, and I wasn't really expecting that. And I think that's kind of like a byproduct of Embiid's knee. When Embiid's right, like we saw it, I think it was game 4 or 5. I think it was game 4 in the Nets series where he just absolutely dominated. And there's going to be games like that when Embiid's feeling it, he's like no one can stop him. He can score at will. But we've seen kind of Embiid slow down the first half of the game, like kind of take it easy, test out his knee, and that's where Tobias Harris has kind of excelled and just he's bumped his peripherals, and so that's been kind of a surprise. Ben Simmons is also someone seeing less usage because you see Jimmy Butler and Joel Embiid dominating usage, and Tobias Harris kind of like crashing the glass. Ben Simmons excels in his peripherals. He's not much of a scorer. Now there were a couple of games versus the Nets where he had big games, but as this Raptors series is going to be a good example where he struggled against the Raptors all year long because Kawhi Leonard's an elite defender and he's been Simmons' primary defender. So I think he's going to struggle this series.
I think this kind of the additions of Harris and Butler kind of put Ben Simmons in a traditional point guard role, which he's not really used to, and that kind of causes some struggles as far as his production because you really don't know if you're getting 65 fantasy points a night or 15.
Yeah, and one thing that really hurts Simmons, and I'm a Ben Simmons fan, so I'm not trying to drag him right here, but he doesn't know how to shoot. He can't shoot.
Oh, of course.
Good teams are going to expose that in the playoffs, especially good coaches. So when there's going to be times in kind of the sequence of the offense where Ben Simmons is just kind of useless. He's going to be setting screens, and we don't get fantasy points for that.
Right. So, I mean, as far as the first round, I mean, we saw a lot of interesting games. As far as targeting for fantasy points and best production and or value, who would be your biggest takeaway as far as a team? Because for me, I'd probably roll with the Trailblazers.
You mean just like individually or
like as a team, some team that you could look for that was very consistent, that you knew you were getting the points from?
So I would actually expect the Blazers to regress in the second round because that Blazers Thunder matchup was a pace up spot for the Blazers, and the Thunder had a high defensive rating, but they played at such a high pace that they gave up a lot of points, and especially at the end of the year they struggled defensively. So that was actually a good fantasy matchup for the Blazers. I don't think they will continue to play that well on offense against the Nuggets, who play really slow and solid defense. They're not their defensive rating maybe suggests that they're an elite defensive team. I don't view them as an elite defensive team. I view them that their defensive rating skewed a little bit because of their slow pace. So I think the Blazers are actually a team that may regress in total as a team from a production standpoint in round 2. That being said, Damian Lillard's one of those studs who's going to see his usage spike because they need to rely on him.
Right, and I think that the pricing has been a little goofy, especially in the first round. Damian Lillard hovered around lower 9K to upper 9K at the end. What is your kind of let's just take the first round per se. What was your kind of thought process and strategy for the first round? Because there was typically 3 games, potentially at one point 4 games slates. Are you picking out two studs and rolling from there? Are you going balanced? What is your kind of thought process?
It really kind of depends. I know that's a bit of a cop-out answer, but it really does. So the Pistons Bucks series, for example, I wasn't really on Giannis that much. Just I had it like the Bucks blew out everyone during the regular season, and I thought they were going to blow out the Pistons, and they did. And I know Giannis had one monster game, but besides that, he wasn't really needed. So prioritizing Harden over Giannis, they were also typically put on the same slate. Um, what complicates it all is when the Warriors are on the slate because they have, basically four high-priced players. Well, five before Boogie got hurt, but I'll just say four high-priced players that we had to consider. That was it. And
you didn't know which one was going to produce 50 fantasy points.
Exactly. And so I was on Durant game one, and that was a mistake. That was Curry's day. But after Curry kind of exploded, he kind of toned it down a little bit, and it was the KD show, especially late.
Yeah. And I definitely I think that KD is going to be a huge factor moving forward into the second round because I think that the first round, as far as from a fantasy standpoint, was kind of somewhat easier to point out some potential value. Like for me, Andre Iguodala was a pretty was a pretty heavy value player, hovering around 3,900. That was just like a plug and play every time they were on the slate because of Boogie's injury.
Absolutely.
And
sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I was going to say that for me, another one was since James Harden's been such a threat and the Utah Jazz have played such good defense, I played a lot of Eric Gordon. I'm going to be honest. And those two for me, hovering around 3.9, and Eric Gordon was roughly 4.4. It was just like easy 25 to 30 points that was kind of needed when you're trying to factor in two studs.
Yep, and so on FanDuel, it was kind of a pain because Iguodala, Gordon, and then the Nuggets also provided a lot of value once they inserted Torrey Craig in the starting lineup. They were all at shooting guard. On DK, because of the positional flexibility, it was kind of easier to use them all. And another value guy who I really liked in the first round was Mo Harkless, who didn't see his price up. He had I think one or two duds, but besides that, he was like around 28 to 35 fantasy points every single game. And, I was just, he was just another one of those values that just wasn't getting priced up and no one was playing much. And it was just one of those plug and plays for me.
I just think it's really hard to play any Nuggets in the first round, in my opinion, other than Jokic, because the usage was kind of spread around so much. I mean, Gary Harris is getting 41 minutes and producing 20 fantasy points. Like, it's outrageous to me to really predict.
He was really good value the first 2 days. He was actually a good example of one of those players that we're going to see more minutes because it's the playoffs, because he's an elite defender, and this is crunch. This is when the Nuggets need to step up.
And I think they're going to need him a lot versus the Trailblazers.
And one thing that will actually hurt CJ McCollum, because I think Gary Harris gave up the least amount of threes on in the NBA on people he was guarding.
Exactly. And another first round value that I think a lot of people didn't take advantage of was Derek White. And he was just an absolute monster taking over because DeMar DeRozan and LaMarcus Aldridge were getting defended so heavily because the Nuggets were pretty good on defense that I think it was just getting overlooked by a lot of people, and it allowed me to make some decent money, I must say.
Yeah, that Derek White kind of monster game, it caught me off guard, I'm not going to lie. But yeah, he's a good example too. He kind of slowed down at the end of the series when, and this is more to the point that stars are going to dominate usage when it matters most. And we saw more of LaMarcus Aldridge and DeMar DeRozan in Game 6 and 7.
Exactly, and I think that's going to be the same scenario for the second round, which is what I want to jump into. So currently we have Boston 1-0 up on Milwaukee. Any thoughts on that? I think it was pretty much a fluke. I have Milwaukee winning in 6.
Yeah, that was I was not expecting.
Well, I mean, when you go to Detroit, you sweep them by 20 points every game. You kind of come in to underestimate your next opponent, and you get caught off guard.
Yeah, but the Bucks also kind of blew out everyone during the regular season. So I mean, I wasn't expecting the Celtics to blow out the Bucks in Game 1, but I think this is in Game 2 is a perfect kind of bounce back spot for someone like Giannis, where people might might just kind of overreact to the Celtics defense. And sure, the Celtics are an elite defensive team and they're a really well coached team, but Giannis is a freak and he's matchup proof. It doesn't really matter who's guarding him.
Right.
And
I
at the
mean,
end of
Al Horford having 5 blocks was kind of a little off the radar, I guess you would say. I mean, the Celtics did have a pace bump, which kind of played into the factor
yep.
because the Bucks. I mean, Giannis can spread the floor in 10 steps, so I think that kind of played into a factor. But I really think that the Bucks are going to scale it back a bit and kind of play a little more defensively.
Yeah, I will like. I do think they'll still play at an elite pace they have all year. Like Kyrie Irving, someone I'm probably going to target every single time he's on the slate until he's like over 10-5. Just he's too cheap. He's going to like. I mean, I'm repeating myself, but he's going to dominate usage in a pace up spot. And throughout the regular season, he was consistently over like the 50 fantasy point mark in kind of important games or against elite level teams. A decent value for the Celtics, I think, moving forward is Jaylen Brown. And
Agreed.
throughout the regular season, he was kind of the Giannis stopper. We saw it last year in the playoffs where not in the playoffs, but we've seen him be called or touted the LeBron stopper. Brad Stevens puts him on the opposing team's best wing, and that's going to be Giannis. So he's going to see a lot of Giannis minutes, and that just locks in his minutes. He was kind of disappointing in the first round of the playoffs, but expect him to bounce back in the second round.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I don't think the Bucks are going to allow this one to get anywhere out of reach. I mean, they won the most games in the season for a reason. And I think that Giannis just has to kind of turn it up. I mean, he got stuffed a few times when he shouldn't have, and it just has to be a better overall play from the entire team.
Definitely. And one thing I wanted to note on the Bucks, and this is more like an observation than like a fantasy thing, but so I think people are sleeping on them. Like I don't think they're going to beat the Warriors, or they would. I don't think they would beat the Warriors.
I think they'll be in the finals.
Yeah, I think they'll be in the finals too. But they kind of remind me of the Warriors' first championship team when no one was really taking them seriously, yet they were blowing everyone out in the regular season. Like the Bucks blew out the Warriors in the regular season. I know the Warriors don't really care about the regular season, but that's a bit of a statement. They can go positionless just as well, if not better, than the Warriors. And like I said, I don't think they have the experience to beat the Warriors, but like people are saying like, oh, once the Warriors get to the finals, it's like
it's not a sweep. Like it's not a 4-0. It's not.
They're gonna give them a real shot.
I agree, and I think that a lot of people underestimate the fact that Chris Middleton and Eric Bledsoe are some serious players.
Yep, and Chris Middleton's the perfect. He's an all-star 3-and-D player, and everyone craves 3-and-D players. He's like a Jimmy. He's not. I don't know if I put him in Jimmy Butler's level, but he's an elite 3-and-D player who can also create his own shot, and he's a difference maker.
And I think he's severely underpriced when it comes to fantasy. I mean, first game one, he's like 5,900 or 6,200, something like that. I mean, he's definitely a 7K and above player.
Yep, and he was consistently even like. So there was a time in the season when he was like in like the 7-5 range where he was a little overpriced because he doesn't have that much of a ceiling, but his floor is so high.
His floor is 35.
Yeah, if you see him under 7K, he's kind of like, all right, lock him in, especially on DK where you get like that 3-point bonus. He'll hit 2 to 4 a game. Those 2 points matter.
And I definitely think Eric Bledsoe, I believe game one was at 6'2" as well, and or 5'9", one of those. And for me, I mean, Eric Bledsoe is a pretty good defender. And for the Bucks to get him and be able to kind of guard Kyrie, obviously he wasn't successful as he could have been, but I think he's very vital to the Bucks even pushing for a playoff run.
From a fantasy perspective, Bledsoe would be the one guy I'd be a little worried about because if Giannis sees like the expected usage bump, and I think he'll see like more ball handling opportunities as the series goes on because what happened in game one didn't work clearly. Bledsoe might see like a slight usage drop. He's a capable producer in his peripheral, so he can still get there with the slight usage drop, but he's the one guy who I'd be a little worried about.
And that would make him for probably a GPP play if you're going to go there.
Exactly.
All right, just so everybody's clear when listening to that. I mean, Giannis is probably going to be a cash game lock whenever he's on the slate. It's just kind of dumb not to play him if we're being honest. Yep. The usage is always there. He's going to be – I mean, he gets it all done. Rebounds are a joke. I mean, it's there. I mean, I don't see how you don't play him game two. just because people are going to be so scared off of what happened game one when he only produced like 40 fantasy.
And for Giannis, don't even think about it as cash or GPP. I'm actually like, I'm with
It's
you.
both.
I'm playing him in game two. I don't care what his ownership is.
Yeah, he could be 5% owned. I'm still paying up.
Well, he'll probably be 90% owned. I'd still play him. It doesn't matter. But yeah, this is just your classic kind of bounce back spot for him, similar to Jimmy Butler tonight. And something I mentioned in my article is just like, when the Sixers are kind of struggling, they lean on Jimmy Butler, and that's
56 fantasy on DK.
Yep.
It was quite a night. I was impressed. So the Sixers, if anybody's just listening and they haven't seen, Sixers took game 2 in Toronto. So tied the series 1-1, which I was quite heavily surprised as they were 6.5 point dogs to start the day.
It's a little disrespectful.
It is a little disrespectful. But with the way that they did have the Nets as their first opponent. You don't really know what to expect. Raptors are a top 2 team. Kawhi did go off as expected. And I think he's probably, for me, I don't think the Raptors, at least for the next game, will see a slate where they're playing alongside the Bucks. But even if they are, for me, regardless, Kawhi is a plug-and-play at 9.8 as he was tonight. To me, it's underpriced.
Yeah, his price is going to have to go up. He also I'm surprised he didn't go up for game 1. He torched the Sixers all year.
Yep.
He's just they haven't found an answer for him, and he's another one of those players that we'll see his usage go up. And we saw late in that game it was Kawhi, and then Kyle Lowry tried to dribble through someone's legs and turn it over.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that that Kawhi had something like a 32.3% usage rate in game 1, which is absolutely staggering. And Siakam was just right up there, which I think is a slept-on play for a lot of people.
Yep, he was slept on in the first round too.
He slept on all season, to be honest. Yep. And I think that's a play that really is going to test Tobias Harris a lot. And potentially because he's too quick for Joel Embiid, that he's not going to be able to guard him. And I saw some of that in the game tonight when watching him. Embiid was just flustered. And I think he's going to be those two are going to be key. If they're on the slate, I would definitely consider in cash playing Kawhi every time.
Yep, for sure.
And on the other side, Philly, this is kind of a crapshoot. If you really break it down, you're torn between Tobias and Jimmy Butler every game. You don't know who you're going to get and how you're going to get it. I went Tobias Harris tonight, and I should have went Jimmy Butler. It is what it is. Tobias Harris got me 35. Jimmy Butler went for 56. So, a lot of people went Ben Simmons tonight, and I don't see why. I don't think I will play Ben Simmons this entire series.
Yep, and there's going to be, I mentioned this in my article today, there's going to be one game where Ben Simmons is going to have a big game. Just good luck picking it. My guess is it's at home. We saw that kind of in the first round. We kind of saw that throughout the season that he was a bit of a better producer at home against top teams. But, the health, if Embiid, the whole thing with the Sixers is how healthy is Joel Embiid, and if he's right, he's going to dominate the ball. That's a fact, and that's going to hurt Ben Simmons a lot. It's tough to really see him excel at his price point right now.
Right.
If his price drops down to the 6K range, which I wouldn't be shocked if it did, then we can start considering playing him just because of his peripherals, where he can go 11, 8, and 8 with 2 steals and a block. That will get there.
I definitely don't think that. Yeah, I definitely don't think Simmons even at home will get there scoring. It will definitely be just dishing dimes. That's all it'll be. It'll be a triple-double type game where it's 10, 10, and 10. It definitely won't be anything crazy because he can get it done on the glass at some points. But I just don't see playing Simmons is solely and primarily a GPP option.
Yes, for sure, and it's just a way of differentiating. He's not going to be high owned, so that's exactly it. And if you're playing multiple lineups, I would consider for Game 3 having some Ben Simmons exposure. Just we kind of saw it in the Nets series. When people started calling him out, we saw a little more effort from him. Which the one you can be a terrible scorer, but effort kind of gets you boards and steals, and that gets you fantasy points.
And on DraftKings, I'm pretty positive Ben Simmons is small forward eligible.
Yep.
which makes him kind of a more interesting play on DraftKings. Not so much FanDuel. I think FanDuel, it's strictly you're either Kyle Lowry or you're Ben Simmons. It's kind of what you're at. Because you're not going to really play. I mean, most nights you're going to play Dame Lillard with how the slate is and how it's kind of broken down for the next few days and how the games will be stacked. I just really don't see you playing Ben Simmons anywhere other than GPP as well as JJ Redick.
Yep. Yeah, JJ Redick's actually been a complete fade for me this entire playoffs, and I'm going to continue to fade him. I mentioned this earlier, but there just isn't enough of a role for him in the playoffs.
I mean, the
Unless he
three-pointers,
goes like 6 for 6 from three.
Yeah.
He's just not taking enough threes at the moment to
but
justify.
yeah, I mean, Toronto has pretty good perimeter defense. I don't see it happening at all. Now, another player that I do see getting some sort of uptake in minutes and production was James Ennis this game.
Yep.
And I was pretty pleased to have played him and have gotten that 20-ish fantasy kind of boost for a player who is roughly 3,200, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's going to be something that you can kind of punt off the bench and kind of go from there.
As long as Mike Scott remains out.
Exactly.
Totally agree. James Ennis. There's a role for James Ennis, and he was undervalued today. I was surprised his
he was like only like
ownership.
20% owned.
Yeah, he was way too low owned. He was in tiers. He was like 11% owned in tier 6, and tier 6 was abysmal. So I was happy I had him at 11% owned there. But yeah, I'm on board with you. If Mike Scott's out, James Ennis is going to see those minutes. It's been throughout the first 2 games. It hasn't been Jonah Bolden. It's been James Ennis.
Right. Now, one thing I do want to mention just before we move on to the next series and kind of players to look for, Toronto value is kind of slim. You can't go Marc Gasol this whole series. In my opinion, you just can't. Embiid's going to be all over him. Serge Ibaka kind of took a crap for everyone's GPP tonight.
Yep.
And I think that's kind of indicative of how this is going to go with the production that Siakam is seeing and how effective he's being on the floor. So I think the only potential GPP flyer is either Van Vliet or Danny Green. And that's only because Danny Green has 3-point upside and Van Vliet is only if Kyle Lowry gets somewhat injured. I mean, that's about all I can really think of because Toronto doesn't really feed much value.
Yeah, and those kind of like GPP darts that you're explaining, you kind of just have to get lucky. That's kind of one way to look at it. You're fishing for value, and like even though we were on James Ennis tonight, I don't think we were expecting 27. I think we would have been happy with 18.
Oh yeah.
So it's sort of we got kind of lucky with James Ennis exploding tonight. Those sort of players are similar, especially like Van Vliet or Norman Powell or Danny Green. At least has playoff
well, he has minutes locked.
Yeah, exactly, and that's important. It's just the Raptors are so deep that he's kind of seeing the JJ Redick syndrome, where he's not much of a factor on offense, and if he doesn't pick up 4 combined steals and blocks, it's hard for him to hit any sort of value.
And I think with Kawhi garnering upwards of 30% usage, Danny Green's just he's going to continue seeing 35 minutes, but he's going to continue also seeing 10 fantasy points a game. And that's going to be solely off of peripherals.
Yep.
And so I think that's probably going to cover that game as far as who to kind of go for. I want to jump over Golden State as far as the bracket, and I want to talk about them last. But I want to jump into this Portland-Denver game because that's currently going on as we are filming this right now. And it's kind of currently halftime, Blazers 55, Nuggets 58. I went CJ McCollum in my GPP tonight, and it's currently torching me. I kind of want to go ahead and get your thoughts on this series because for me, it's Jokic every game.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to be that way because Portland's terrible without Nurkic.
Yep, and Jokic has been probably the most consistent producer throughout the playoffs. He's kind of just an automatic 50-burger, and we saw it late in the San Antonio series when they really needed him. He saw that elite usage that he saw for like a couple weeks during the regular season when Denver was like really shorthanded. And when that's happening, when he's looking to score as much as Dish and he's just crashing the glass, It's got 75-point potential. Like it's hard to pass on that.
Right, and I think I almost think you can double that back with Dame Lillard, who has like 32% usage. It's like dumb.
So Dame, I agree. He's an elite target. I don't think he's the lock button he was during the Thunder. And I think I touched on this earlier. This is a way, way worse matchup in terms of fantasy for the Blazers than it was in round one. The Nuggets play slow. They have elite perimeter defenders, and they have a lot of perimeter defenders, meaning they're not going to get tired running around chasing. They're just going to keep switching, switching, switching. And so Damian Lillard is matchup proof, and he's going to get his. He's a little scoring dependent, so it just worries me a little bit.
Right, and I agree. The assist upside is possible, but it's not guaranteed. He's definitely the scoring type of guard. I think on the Blazers, you can definitely look for Al-Farouq Aminu to be sort of a value that you can look for. Potentially, he does have a very tough matchup against my heaviest GPP option of the entire second round in Paul Millsap. Because I think that Paul Millsap with just a terrible point per minute player, but the upside is 50-point upside.
And so this is also a better matchup for Millsap as he's way stronger than Al-Farouq Aminu, and it showed in the first half that the Nuggets were feeding him in the low post, and he scored. I think he had 17 in the first half or something like that. And I actually slightly disagree with you on Aminu as a value play. I get it, like the minutes are there. I still prefer Harkless over Aminu. I know Harkless is kind of doing nothing at the moment, but it's Aminu. I think he's got his hands tied on Millsap, and Millsap sort of sits in the corner or is posting him up, which will limit his rebounding upside. Aminu's rebounding upside, I should say, and defensive upside. And that's what we need out of Aminu. We need those rebounds, we need those steals, and we need those blocks.
Right, and it's that obviously Aminu would be GPP play, if anything, because of course, cheap. Yeah, he is cheap. He's roughly 5K, and there's potential for 35 points. Yeah. It's been like that all season, but like I said, the matchup is tough. There is potential. But I would say that Millsap probably, he's way too underpriced. And I think that Millsap is only a GPP option, definitely not for cash games. But I think that that's somewhere you could go to kind of get some sort of edge if you were to fade somebody like Embiid or Tobias Harris or something like that for a power forward spot.
Yep, and he was tonight because, like as you mentioned, he was just underpriced. I think both sides overreacted to his first round, where he was actually terrible in the first round. But you have to remember, he was on LaMarcus Aldridge the majority of the time, and Aldridge has such high post usage that affects Millsap's peripherals.
Right.
And something part of every single slate, whether it's the regular season or whatever, I don't like targeting opposing bigs of, like, let's say Vucevic or Jokic, anyone who's guarding them. It's a bad matchup because they're demanding so much attention in the post that they drift just far enough away from their rim where it affects those peripherals. And center is where you need those peripherals.
I definitely agree with that as well, and that kind of brings me to my next sort of person I'm going to. I think he's very underpriced, but I only think he's GPP is Jamal Murray. The peripherals for me aren't where they should be, and he's trying to sort of imitate Dame Lillard, and it's kind of not working.
Yes. So the thing with Murray is he's like there are some crazy stats that involve him and like the Nuggets winning, where if he hits like whatever 3 threes or something, they win. Like I don't remember it off the top of my head, but they have a really high winning percentage. They went 4-0 in the first round against the Spurs when he scored over 20 points. So like the Nuggets, as much as everyone says, like, and it's true, Jokic is the person who basically runs the team, and he's the guy. But Murray is so important, and they need to get him going in this series. I kind of like him. I'm not too worried about the free throws. He's going to score. He's also like kind of a poor first half performer. So look for him to kind of score a bit in the second half. But I'm curious to watch. He's someone who he's important basically just to analyze this second half of game one.
Right. I definitely think that you don't play him game one. I definitely think it's a sort of a watch and learn type of deal for how he's going to respond to Dame Lillard. That brings me kind of to the rest of the Nuggets, which is pretty much a toss up. Will Barton doesn't get the minutes or the usage that he used to, and he's definitely not the player he used to be. Malik Beasley flashes some upside, same with Torrey Craig, and Gary Harris gets massive minutes and has potential for 40-point upside. Obviously, I think we can agree that Gary Harris is probably the top value from the Nuggets by a mile here.
Absolutely, and he's probably going to get priced up at some point.
Yeah.
He's playing pretty well tonight, so it wouldn't shock me if he's priced up game two.
And
you're kind of throwing darts between Craig, Beasley, and Barton.
Yeah.
That's all it is. Craig will play the most. Beasley's the best shooter, and Will Barton's kind of the wild card where
you don't know.
Explode. He's the definition of a GPP punt.
I mean, I went Beasley tonight. I think I made a mistake. But I mean, to me, the production throughout the season was quite intriguing to see throughout the regular season. Even so, a little bit the first round. I just think that the shooting upside just gives him a little bit better of a point per dollar matchup.
Yep, I think that's fair. He was also really cheap.
Yeah, he was 3,900 tonight.
Yeah, he was cheap. Craig is kind of the, he's maybe a poor man's Gary Harris who can't really shoot, but
got the rebounds.
Yep, exactly. He crashes the boards and he gets some steals, and so he exploded one game. The first game he started, actually, I think he put up like 36 or something like that. So the upside's there. He's just it's a little bit of risk.
Right, and so that's gonna bring us to Golden State, Houston, battle of whatever you want to call it. I mean, probably the most exciting second round matchup you're probably gonna watch, and that's an understatement. This is going to be probably one of the hardest games to kind of predict because you find yourself in game one on the same slate as Giannis and the Celtics. And I think that's indicative for the future on tomorrow, being Tuesday, on the same slate. Is Harden for cash games mandatory?
Yes. I would say so. It's tough because there's really not that much value on this.
I know.
On tomorrow's like 2-game slate. So, saying he's like gun to my head, yeah, I'm playing James Harden in cash because I'm going to take those 50 points, and on a 2-game slate, I'm less concerned about his like 5x value or 6x value, as I'm more intrigued by I can get 50. I start with 50 points essentially. One thing that's really important to note about this series is the Rockets play really, really, really slow against the Warriors. That is their game plan. They're trying to just, ISO James Harden at the top, force basically Iguodala or Clay off him, get him in like a mismatch. They were trying to go after Draymond Green last game one. But they just run the clock down to like 3 or 5 seconds left on the shot clock,
and then they shoot a 3.
Yep, and it really slows the game down.
It slows the upside of everybody.
Yep, on both teams, and that's what complicates this matchup because there's so many talented fantasy producers in it, and everyone's expensive, and someone's going to go off. But it's just it's tough. It's tough to guess.
Do you? In my opinion, I still think you prioritize Giannis over Harden.
Yes. Well, especially for tomorrow, yes, I would. Giannis is number one, basically on my big board tomorrow. I think he's just the perfect bounce back candidate. They had an embarrassing home game one loss. They're at home in game two. That's not going to happen again. So
right.
Giannis is number one, like tomorrow for me, without a doubt. I think depending on how each series goes, that will change on who I prioritize between Giannis and Harden. Harden, we admire Dame's like 32 whatever usage rating. Harden's going to be around 40. His usage rating is off the charts. He has the
Of
leading
course.
usage. It's going to be him all game long. He might approach like 45.
So
And
if we talk for future, not just tomorrow, here's my opinion for this series. I can't play Steph Curry at the price he's at with the Chris Paul defense.
yeah, I hear you. His price is dropping though. His production has been terrible. So I mean, I know he hurt his ankle. But I think he makes for a really strong GPP play just because
Of
his
course.
price is down and his ownership's going to be down, and he's Steph Curry. He can
Right.
catch fire and he can put up 60 in a blink of an eye. So I'm not a complete fade on Curry. I actually would recommend having exposure to him if you're playing multiple lineups.
Right, but I mean, if we're talking GPPs, Curry, I think you can take Curry and or Chris Paul for GPP, and I also think that a top target for this series has to be mandatory Kevin Durant. I,
Yes,
in my opinion, I think he's going to be somebody that is, in a sense, unguardable to anybody. PJ Tucker about the only person that could even put some sort of defense remotely close. I mean, the elevation, the shot. I mean, Curry's guardable. Kevin Durant for most type of people is not guardable, especially when he's putting up 22 shots a game.
for sure. But the one area that scares me with Durant is Houston's slow pace. And we saw it in game one. Durant was scoring dependent in game one. He scored 35 points. He had, 45 ish fantasy
Yep.
points. So, that's not typical of Kevin Durant. Usually he gets a couple steals and a blocks. He's around 12 combined rebounds and assists. If he's going to be like under 10 rebounds and assists with like a block and a steal, he's going to have to score 40 points in order to hit value at his increased price tag. So I'm a little
You're a
less on
little
Kevin
hesitant.
Durant. I'm a little hesitant on Kevin Durant. He's priced ahead of Giannis. I think that's crazy. On FanDuel,
Well,
he's priced
game
ahead of
one he was
Giannis.
priced at 9,800,
Yes.
which
He's
I
out.
think is very, very, very cheap for a Kevin Durant. I think 10 to 10.2 is rough price range.
So on FanDuel, he's 11-4 for tomorrow.
See, that's a
Uh,
little crazy to me. I think that
yeah, it's basically it's site dependent. He's like no, he's 91 on DK, and that's a
that's
bargain on
cheap.
DK. Yeah, that's
And
cheap.
I think tomorrow, as far as game two, I think he's going to be needed. But overall, throughout the entire series, I think he's probably. I think if you're playing GPPs for NBA, especially throughout the second round, you're kind of trying to find the game where Klay Thompson hits 12 threes.
I'm actually never gonna play Clay.
I, I'm I'm never gonna play him either, but the somebody who does is gonna cash out big because there is one game he's gonna explode for 50 fantasy. It's inevitable.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, it just you're yeah. I mean, no argument there. He's gonna get hot one game. His price is fine. I'm not against playing him. He's actually kind of like a cash game play at his price. He's been around like 28 to 32 all playoffs long. He hasn't shown much upside.
But it's a safe floor.
Yeah, it's a decently safe floor. I'm never gonna play him.
Yeah, I don't understand. I mean, to me, the values of this series, and for people using or that will be listening to this on Wednesday for further games, the biggest takeaways from the Rockets is going to be Eric Gordon, who's priced very low. I believe he put up 27 points in game one at price at 4,400. It's quite a joke. And the Warriors, Andre Iguodala is going to see the biggest uptick in minutes and usage without DeMarcus Cousins and Draymond Green playing the five. I think that's probably going to be he's very good with his peripherals in minimal scoring. He's a guy who could flash 30-point upside.
For sure. And it's all about what the sites do with his price. FanDuel priced him up a little bit for game two. DraftKings, he's still cheap. It really, if he's over 6K, that's when you have to start thinking twice about targeting him because he really needs to excel defensively in order to kind of hit that upside. But, I'm with you. The minutes are there. He's part of the Warriors' best lineup, the NBA's best lineup, I should say, their death lineup where it's Curry, Clay, him, Durant, and Draymond. And
Yeah,
we're gonna
he's
see
bound
more,
to see some
we're gonna see
garbage
more.
points.
yeah, we're going to see more and more of that lineup. They started with that lineup game one. They'll probably start it for game two and throughout the series. So, yeah.
So I think that would pretty much cover our discussion for kind of top targets and values throughout the rest of the second round of the playoffs, and kind of who you can look for based on round one performances, and kind of who can flash the upside for the lowest price. So I do want to go ahead and let everybody know that if you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and like and subscribe. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, go ahead and give the 5-star rating, subscribe to the podcast. You can stay up to tune with all of the episodes. We're putting out roughly 3 to 4 a week. So we're seeing we're flashing upside in episode drops as well. So what I do want to do is thank Stefano for coming on the show. I appreciate all the knowledge and especially bringing something new for the first episode. I thought this would be a great, for the first NBA episode, I think this would be a great time for you to come on. If you haven't already, go give him a follow at Big Money Play on Twitter. He's a product manager over at the QuantEdge. Go ahead and sign up for their website. Show them some love. Give him a follow. I don't... I've seen a lot of websites that do what they do, and they give out the top tier, best quality analytics and data, and the articles are crazy. You don't have to do any research after reading one of these articles, which is exactly what you're coming to this website for. So if you haven't already, go show them some love. Stefano, I appreciate you coming on the show, man. I appreciate the conversation and the insight that you could provide to the fans.
Of course, Joe. Thanks. I had a lot of fun, and happy to come on whenever.
Alrighty, I appreciate it. I will see you guys next time for another episode. Alrighty, peace.